These same practices can also increase soil's capacity to store carbon and generate high-value carbon credits with Carbon by Indigo. Greg Wohl of Indiana is one of these farmers. He enrolled with Carbon by Indigo in 2020, and the benefits are clear.
The main result is lower overhead on equipment, labor, fuel cost. This is what we love to do, to no-till, to build our soils up, and to get paid for it on top. Carbon credits was a no-brainer.
Curious how much you could earn from farming carbon? Get an estimate in less than a minute at indigoag.com/radio. Fortify your soil and your bottom line with Carbon by Indigo. Visit indigoag.com/radio today. Terms and conditions apply. See program agreement for details.
Your friend in Central Illinois. WHOW.
Top of the morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube. It's brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. My guest on this segment of the morning show is Dr. Hilary Stanifer, Superintendent of Blue Ridge Schools. Dr. Stanifer, a good morning. How are you today?
Good morning, Seth. I'm doing great today. How about you?
Doing well. Thanks for asking, and thanks for making time for us as always. And it's been a while, Dr. Stanifer, since you and I have caught up. So how are things going in Blue Ridge Schools? What's the latest?
Well, things don't slow down. Even when we don't talk, school keeps going on. So it's hard to believe we're past the first quarter mark and rounding the corner well into second quarter, and we're doing well. We have a lot of great things going on here at Blue Ridge this year we're excited about.
Absolutely. Among those, of course, over the weekend, your 8-man football program got word that they have qualified and made the postseason. How about that, Dr. Stanifer?
That is right. They had a great defeat on Galva for 44-34 on Friday night. They even had a fire department welcome when they came back into town that night. So everybody was really excited to see that happen.
Sure. So what are they doing for the playoffs? Where are they going? Who are they playing? How about those things?
Playoffs will begin this coming weekend. So Saturday, the 29th in the afternoon, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're going to go against Amboy High School. Amboy is up north in Illinois, so they will be traveling up there. It's about a couple hours away. So we are hoping to put together a fan bus so we can have some big cheering crowd for them. This is the first time we're going to the playoffs in, I think, over 20 years. So it's a really exciting event here in Farmer City.
Sure. Very good. So, Dr. Stanifer, when it comes to just the programs in general, I know if I'm not mistaken, volleyball program, are they still going? They went to regionals last week, I thought.
We're doing well in volleyball too. I don't have stats for you right now, but I enjoy watching those games. And we're fortunate to have Coach Evan Miles. He was going to be done with volleyball, but he's come back for this year. And the girls are really performing well under his leadership once again.
Yeah, he gets me those box scores about every game. It's nice to keep track, and it sounds like the girls are doing well. So very good. Well, Dr. Stanifer, let's dive into here this morning as we catch up today. I know that we've talked our last several visits about mission statement in Blue Ridge, and making sure that you're following that mission statement, and it's not just something on a wall. It's not just words printed on a pretty cover letter, things like that. You want to live your mission statement. What is your mission statement, and how have you lived it lately?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked about that, because that was one important thing for me. I felt like in the process of creating the mission statement, it was tempting to feel like once you had it in print that you were at the finish line. And that's one thing that I say in education that we often do. We miss the fact that something is just the beginning when we think we've accomplished something, and we are mistaken when we think it's the end. So yes, our mission statement is that we will embrace, engage, equip, and empower students, staff, parents, and the community. So we keep those 4 verbs, our embrace, engage, equip, and empower, in front of us all the time. And a lot of the things that we want to do here would be involving our 3 communities. So 2 of our campuses are in Farmer City, 1 in Mansfield, but we also have our Bellflower community. No school in that community at this time, but we are still a 3 community district, and we want to make sure that we're engaging everybody, not just the students, but also families and community members as well. So that's very important to us.
Very good. So talk to me a little bit about how you have engaged the community lately.
So just about a week ago, we had an event. We had a great name for it: Connect, Create, and Collaborate. So in the past, before COVID, we had evenings, maybe once or twice a year, that we would call Blue Ridge Connect. And we would invite families in. We would have them sit in different table areas and talk about different things that the district was engaged with. And we wanted to kind of step that up a little bit and see if we could invite families in to have some really important conversations. And what has been on our mind recently? Digital safety and making sure that parents have a way to communicate with each other. When your kids are young and you're trying to figure out is this a proper age for a cell phone? How long should my child be gaming at night? Should they be able to, be on social media at what age? All of those questions. We wanted to engage families in that question. But if you just put an event like that out there, you might not get a big response. So we went to our 3 art teachers, K through 3, 4 through 8, and our 9 through 12 art teacher, and they agreed to put together a fall art show. And it was unbelievable, the work that they brought from the students. And so we had about 149 RSVPs coming to our art show, our Connect, Create, and Collaborate. So families came in for the art show. They could see every piece was labeled so they could see their kids and their grandkids and their neighbors' work. And then we engaged families with some tasting menu from what our food service director is working on this year. And then we invited families to have conversation with families that were in the same grade building that their children are in. And we just talked about internet safety and phone safety and things like that, and just were able to share with one another. So it was a really, really nice and comfortable event, I would say.
And that's interesting, Dr. Stanifer, because when I hear community engagement, I think of things like, asking the community for input on, a project that's coming up or curriculum or this or that, input on decisions being made. But, you're taking it a step further, and it's just saying, hey, this is what's happening in our school district. Come and see the, kind of the fruits of the labor of our students.
Yeah, exactly. And then come and have conversation where we don't want to tell you what to do with your child with technology, but we want to provide some resources. We want you to know it's a safe place to have those conversations, to ask each other, what's going on, especially with Christmas coming up, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of times where families make a technology purchase for their child at this time of year, and it's easy to think that every single child has what your child doesn't have, and I have to catch up with the neighbors. Well, this was a great time to have some of those conversations. So we hope to be able to open that up again in the spring. Similar topic, and just adding on more information.
So what will you be doing going forward to further engage the community? Anything on the calendar coming up, Dr. Stanifer?
Well, we have a date picked but not advertised yet for November, right before Thanksgiving. Our 4th through 8th grade building, the intermediate and junior high, has a new principal, Mr. Bert Huddleston. He's doing a fantastic job. He has a very strong academic focus, and he's noticed some areas where parents might not be taking advantage of some of the access that they have to student grades and watching what's going on with their students' progress across different subject areas. So he wants to create an event to invite parents in to talk about how they can watch how their child is doing and when they should be asking questions and how they can get attached to Google Classroom as a parent. And so how are we going to attract families to come in? Well, we have asked our STEM club at the high school, some of our science and technology teachers and our students that stay and work on that club, they're going to come over to the Mansfield building, and they're going to offer some student-based, age-appropriate activities. So in one part of the building, students will be doing some fun fall-themed STEM activities, while in another location in the building, we have the parents involved with our principal and our curriculum coordinator, and they're asking and getting questions answered about how they can be more engaged in their child's learning environment.
Very good. So look forward to things like that coming up as well. Anything else planned, Dr. Stanifer? Anything down the road you want to promote this morning?
Well, I would say that's our big focus for right now, working on those things, and then we'll start looking at the second semester. So
sure.
One of the questions that we asked our families during the digital citizenship evening was, what other topics would you like to see like this? And so far the ideas were just more work on technology. Tell us about some of the new apps, things that parents should be watching for.
Yeah,
so
very good.
We'll be happy to engage.
Well, and it's good that they want to be a part of that and know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. It's important for everybody to be aware.
Dr. Hilary Stanifer is the superintendent of Blue Ridge Schools, my guest on the phone here for this morning. Dr. Stanifer, talk to me a little bit about I know it's budget time. Those reviews of budgets and things are ongoing. It's been a while since we've talked about this. How's it looking in Blue Ridge Schools right now?
budget is looking pretty good. That's been approved and sent up to the state and all the different places where you send that. We're running a little bit of a deficit budget, but where the board has approved that, we have enough of a fund balance that we're okay where we are right now. The anticipated deficit is less than it was last year, even despite the fact that we had some good raises for our staff members across the board this year. So we're sitting good there, and now it's time for the superintendent to be finishing up that tax levy. It's that season now too.
Sure. So when it comes to the budget, Dr. Stanifer, you mentioned running a deficit budget. Is that of concern for you? I mean, is that a forward thinking? Is that a trend that you're kind of concerned about? How about that aspect of it?
I would say that one of my funds, my transportation fund, is where I have a little bit of a concern with things. If they continue to go as the way they are, that will be a fund that we have a problem in another year or two. But in Blue Ridge, if you're looking outside of your windshield as you're driving somewhere around in Blue Ridge, you're going to see that there's quite a few turbines that are up and not running yet. I think we had 60 some turbines in our Northern Sapphire Sky project that I believe are going to be turning by the end of the calendar year, which is coming up pretty soon. So that is going to be a positive financial impact for Blue Ridge, probably not until FY25, and we don't want to count our dollars until they come in, but that is something that the board is aware of. So that takes a little bit of the sting of running a deficit budget. Plus you have to look at your cash on hand too, your fund balances. And we did some bond refinancing back in the day when the rates were really, really low a couple of years ago. And so there's a little bit in working cash also. So it's not, so running a deficit budget is not enough to so the state doesn't require a deficit reduction plan when you're in our situation. So that's a little bit of good news. And then the Sapphire Sky coming in is a little bit of relief there as well. And depending on what Piatt County does, there could be a Goose Creek wind farm project going on within our boundaries as well next year.
Looking at that as well. Dr. Stanifer, how about CPPRT dollars? I've heard a lot of superintendents talk a little bit about how those are up this year. I don't know how much your district benefits from those, but what's the status of that fund in your district?
Yeah, that's up for us as well. And I'll tell you, I'll give a shout out to Vic Zimmerman, who, as a retired superintendent, he's now what they call an IASA Field Services Director. And since I'm in my third year, I get the privilege of working with Vic. He covers my area, and we get to learn more from him. And so he's been able to explain a little bit about that CPPRT. And I understand, where that money comes from. It's the corporate personal property replacement tax. So all of the items that a large company could own, the way he explained it was very eye-opening for me. He said, a lot of the mom and pop businesses, unfortunately, folded during COVID because of supply chain and workers and all the things that COVID brought. But some of the larger industries were really able to benefit, and they grew. And so they might have been investing in additional property, machinery to run their business, and then school districts benefit from that. So yes, we're one of those groups who is benefiting. We don't have as large a CPPRT fund as other districts, but it's still a benefit, and we appreciate that.
No question. Now of course that's a fund that kind of ebbs and flows over time. So while it may be up this year, that doesn't mean necessarily that's going to be a long-term trend, much less a trend even into next year. I mean, you never know, but it's not one of those things you can regularly count on to continue to grow.
Right, absolutely. And then you have your advisors, your financial advisors that will come through and let superintendents know, you should probably look at maybe 75 or 80% of what you got last year, or they might tell you, nope, we anticipate it's going to be the same for next year. Go ahead and budget that in. We all like to be very conservative in our revenue budgeting, of course, and overestimate our expenditures. But yeah, it's a nice extra piece of funding for sure.
Well, since you brought it up, I was kind of curious about this when you mentioned running a deficit budget. But is it a deficit budget because you're budgeting so conservatively? Like, could you see a scenario where maybe you don't want to say for sure, but perhaps come when you have to put that final budget on file next year, could you see things at least breaking even? How about that?
That is a possibility. Last year, the deficit was a little bit larger, and by the time we realized everything, it was about half of what we anticipated. So that was a good thing. And so since it's smaller this year, that either means I'm budgeting a little bit tighter as I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with sitting in this chair and in this role. But, one of our things I'll be a little bit scared to say this out loud, but our health insurance cost for the district right now is considerably lower than it had been before. That's something that we're with Blue Cross now, and it's a fantastic deal that we have through the end of the 23 calendar year. So that's helped us out quite a bit. So yeah, there is a slight possibility that we could come out without being in the deficit.
Sure. Well, Dr. Stanifer, anything else on the budget? Anything that's standing out we haven't touched on this morning?
I think we covered it pretty well. Thank you.
That is Dr. Hilary Stanifer, Superintendent of Blue Ridge Schools, my guest on the phone. More to come with her here this morning on the WHOW Morning Show.
WHOW.
Let's check the opening numbers now at the Chicago Board of Trade on this Monday. I'm Jim Taylor for the RFD Radio Network. Corn, beans, and wheat starting the day lower. December corn, 679 3/4, down 3 3/4. March corn, 686, down 4.5. May corn down 4, 685 3/4. November beans opening the day down 16 1/4, 1379 1/4. January beans, 1388 3/4, down 15 1/4. March wheat, 1396 3/4, that's down 15. Looking at Chicago, December wheat, 842.5, down 8 3/4. March wheat starting today, down 8, 861.5. May wheat, 870 1/4, down 9 1/4. December bean meal, 411.80, down 610. December bean oil starting today, 71.86, that's up 38 cents. Jim Taylor, RFD Radio Network.
Are you a friend of agriculture? This is Scott Baum from Baum Chevrolet Buick in Clinton. We're giving a $500 Friends of Ag discount to anyone that orders a new Chevrolet or Buick to be built just for you this month. Are you a friend of ag? You are if you're a member of any ag organization, employed by any ag-related business, including research, inputs, manufacturing, sales, and marketing, and of course, ag education. Come in, order yours today. BaumChevyBuick.com. Right from the start.
MR Systems Wireless is your local internet provider for Clinton and surrounding area. They have the products you want and the local service you deserve. MR Systems Wireless Internet service for home or business includes unlimited data, unlimited streaming, and unlimited calling. Plans start at just $48 a month and get a free Roku 4 lease with our media packages. Get the speed you need with MR Systems Wireless. Call them at 935-2100. That's 935-2100 for MR Systems Wireless.
Your friend in Central Illinois, WHOW.
Once again, good morning. Thanks for being with us. I'm your host today, Seth Lawrence. The WHOW Morning Show streams to Facebook and YouTube, brought to you by Peterson Insurance, your Pekin Insurance agent in Clinton. Again, my guest on the phone today, Dr. Hilary Stanifer, is the superintendent of Blue Ridge Schools. Dr. Stanifer, this has been something that's kind of come up periodically in my last visits, several visits with your peers across the area, seeing a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but just things that are coming out of COVID, remnants of COVID, where, students are not as prepared as they should be, whether it be for the next grade level academically, maybe emotionally, socially. What are you finding in your district? What does this look like for you?
Yeah, I keep on telling my administrative team, we're not unique. We're having a lot of concerns with students in the social emotional realm, like you just mentioned. I think it has to go back to, a couple years out of a regular school routine. Even when kids were in the building and they were masked up, the communication was just not the same. And when they were home a couple days a week, the communication with peers was different. There's a lot of there's been a push because of the pandemic, I think, to take to your phone to communicate with others. And sometimes that's a really hard habit to break, even when you don't have to communicate that way anymore. Mm-hmm. So we've been doing a lot of social emotional social emotional learning work across all of our grade levels. We have a coach that we work with. She comes in and meets with our district instructional leadership team, which has representatives from all 3 buildings. She does that monthly. We've also had some brain-based learning for our staff, learning how children's minds are working, and we also have had some trauma-informed sessions with our special ed co-op from Tri-County. They've come in to give us some information, and really it's amazing the impact that a pandemic or abuse or trauma from previous years from childhood can still impact a student, even if they're a lot older. And so we're trying to have our staff understand, use the iceberg example so many times, and what you see on top of the water is one thing, but what the child carries with them, either that iceberg below the waterline, or sometimes they call it an invisible backpack, what they bring with them is so deep and so challenging. And we have to make sure as educators that we're not treating our kids like there was no pandemic. We have to understand that not only are they bringing all this baggage in, but they may have missed some pretty critical concepts. And so if we're trying to teach exactly like we did before, assuming that they had normal educational levels for the last couple of years, it's not going to be the same. And so we really have to look at who those post-pandemic kids are and then make adjustments ourselves to meet their needs.
Will this be something, Dr. Stanifer, eventually, not to say like it's at the end of cycling through kids that have been impacted by COVID in the next, 15 years or something, but is this going to be something where you could see progress made with especially younger kids, that I think of that like pre-K through like maybe 3rd, 4th grade-ish age level? Will this be something where you could like make up the ground that was lost, not just from an academic perspective, a social, emotional, mental perspective? How about that?
Well, you cut out a little bit there, so I'm going to try to read through the lines what you're asking for. Specifically with our younger grades, I think we do see more impact there socially, because when kids are at home with mom and dad, it's a little bit different than when they're with 15 of their peers and they have a disagreement. So yes, we need to continue to work at the classroom level with those kiddos. We still need as adults to be trained in how to deal with that, because they're more significant events than there were before. We can see kids lashing out a little bit more, maybe getting a little bit more verbal when they're in their levels of frustration. So we have to have the proper response for that. And that's also part of our mission statement. We need to communicate well with home too, and not, you don't make a phone call and place blame. You make a phone call to say, hey, here's what we're dealing with today. What suggestions do you have, mom or dad? What are you seeing at home? How can we work together to help get through this? And when will we see the end? I don't know that anybody knows the end of that. I think it's going to be a number of years, and it could be different. It could be a little bit longer for the young ones, and it could be a totally different model that we're looking at for the older ones. Like I said, with technology, how many times do you see a kid sitting next to another kid and they're both on their technology and they're not talking to each other, right?
Often, yeah.
Yeah, we've tried to break that at the high school. We came out very firm over the summertime with no phones in the classroom, nothing being used. We let them have them during passing periods and at lunchtime. But I'm telling you, we're starting to see less lunchtime usage even. Starting to get kids to open up their mouths and speak with each other, and that's refreshing.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about, I mean, that's what kids are seeing at home too. I think of our house, unfortunately, and that's the case sometimes as well. Dr. Stanifer, I hate to do this to you. I got to let you go. That's Dr. Hilary Stanifer, Superintendent of Blue Ridge Schools.
WHOW.
The Big 1520 WHOW